Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. I am delighted to welcome back one of our wonderful founding contributors for The Contrarian, Ruth Ben-Ghiat. Ruth, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Well, unfortunately, you have much to add to our current situation. And by that, I mean you are an expert in fascism around the globe and throughout history. We're seeing a whole series of moves by this administration, and I'm wondering if you could help put this in context. Let's take academia. There is an assault on funding at schools. There is a refusal to let academics back into the United States. There are demands that one university, Columbia, put entire departments in a receivership. Is this familiar in terms of dictatorships, authoritarian movements, and why do they do that? Why do they go after academic institutions?
Yeah, pretty much every regime, whether it's left or right, goes after universities, goes after intellectuals, and places of learning. And universities are particularly vulnerable, and so you see universities become like a microcosm of what other kinds of changes they want in society. So, for example, under military dictatorship of Pinochet, so you have military dictatorship, you had a takeover by military officials who became rectors, but you had a kind of under the excuse to, quote, remove politics from learning. You had the closures of entire departments, philosophy, social science, with the excuse that they were laboratories of Marxism. So you have curriculum that becomes politicized. You have purges of faculty and students, and in our case, what really is going on are two parallel processes. One is an authoritarian capture attempt of all institutions, including education. The other is an attempt to kind of kill off American prosperity and soft power in fields of research, in science. Science has gotten more of the attention. And so part of this is kind of starving universities from the top, taking away funding and stuff, but also through the bottom by going after targeting researchers, politicizing curriculum, making a hostile environment for pro-democracy scholars as well.
The other thing they've done, of course, is target law firms. Paul Weiss is the latest victim. They've gone after Covington. They've gone after Perkins and Coy. What is it about lawyers that gets the fascists and the authoritarians riled up?
This is very interesting because they are combining a traditional assault on the judiciary that we see in many authoritarian regimes. Usually these other regimes, whether it's or states, whether it's Orban or Erdogan, they do this much more slowly. But so we're seeing this kind of delegitimizing judges, if you don't, not respecting rule of law. And so any judge who doesn't do your bidding has to be kind of discredited. But going after the law firms is something that is more unusual, certainly in the first months of a nascent authoritarian state. But it's very important to do because in a way, the law firms are the feeding ground for the pipeline of people who make up the judiciary. And the law firms are also the places that might be mobilized to defend democracy, to defend individuals who are targeted. And so if you go after these law firms early, you're doing what is called setting an example. And autocrats love to set an example so that others watch and they comply without even being asked to.
One of the other things they're doing is that in the name of DEI, and they're very vague on what that means, they are literally trying to erase part of history. They temporarily took down at the DOD images and information about Jackie Robinson, who served in the military. They took down information about a few of the Iwo Jima soldiers who held up the flag. Why do they do that? Why do they try to change, frankly, the visual history of the country that they're in?
Jen, I'm very glad you're asking this because literally I'm teaching a course on World War II right now, and we were doing Iwo Jima and the Pacific Theater, and I felt like I was living through things that actually the communists excelled at. Uh, Famously, Stalin and other communists, if somebody would fall out of favor, they would have, a picture of the elites, and then they would reprint that picture with the person removed. And in that case, during the Great Terror, they couldn't even keep up with so many people being removed. Here, this is a really concerted and organized effort to rewrite the history of America as only white activity, and that all others who are non-white, who participated in patriotic, dutiful, sacrificial actions, and thus are heroes, must not be recognized as such because they have to be deleted from history. They have to be erased from history. This is a classic authoritarian thing. And this is also, I would add, Trump is a man who really understands the power of images. And so erasing these people from the picture, erasing their records, their portraits have been taken down. He knows the symbolic value of that.
Really fairly stunning. We have also seen a complete redefinition of America as it faces the world. The destruction of Voice of America, which was literally the voice of freedom. We've seen the reversal of our positions, no longer supporting democratic Ukraine, but taking the side of Putin. In foreign affairs, do authoritarians behave this way? In other words, they seek the approval and comfort of other authoritarian regimes?
So there are two things going on here. One is a class, it fits the things that authoritarians do. You ally with other authoritarians, and it's been a wrenching attempt to totally and quickly realign America from a democratic power, a supporter of democratic internationalism, to a country that is tacitly and with Russia quite openly an ally and part of this nascent autocratic axis. So that's going on. The other thing, which is a little more uncommon, is that unfortunately for us, Trump and his unelected co-president Musk are in office to destroy government and to destroy America. And so all of the soft power and other power footprint of America abroad has to be diminished or even erased. And so the whole network of aid, for example, humanitarian aid, the things that America does that make people look upon America fondly as a do-good country, all of those have to go. So you have the destruction of U.S. aid. The same thing we mentioned before, the destruction of American ingenuity, science, technology, medical research. Those things are exported and they're a sign of American progress. Those have to go. So there's this attempt to kind of take down America in every way, internally and externally, as a democratic power. And we will see more and more that America will be asserted as an autocratic power. But first, you have to destroy anything that is associated positively with America and democracy. It's stunning at the scale and the speed at which these projects are proceeding.
Wow. It's interesting. I met with Governor Pritzker of Illinois, and he said very similar things. He said that they are trying to destroy it and remake it for their own use. And we have seen, obviously, a project to eliminate programs and benefits for middle class and working class people and to aggregate power. Call it an oligarchy, call it whatever else. is this a common pattern, in other words, to shift the emphasis of government into kind of a self-dealing, self-reinforcing mechanism?
Yeah, and it usually proceeds much more slowly, and we do have a twist. Like my book Strongman only has one guy on the cover because that's the strongman is one person. Here we have two people. And so that is a twist. America is actually innovating the playbook. And in another way as well, when we think about oligarchs, for example, Putin, had his arrangements starting in the early 2000s with oligarchs, or Modi has Indian oligarchs who are private sector people who collaborate with him, for example, buying up media properties because they're billionaires, they're very rich. And so they help him to take control of media or other businesses without being in the government. The twist is that Elon Musk had everything. He was the richest man in the world. He had a social media platform, but he did not have a way to get inside a government of a sovereign state. And Trump, in his greediness, gave that to him. So we have this kind of, when people say oligarch, the oligarch is usually not in the government. The whole point of them is that they prop up the regime being outside. So we're innovating to unknown effect, except very destructive effect. We're innovating in that direction.
It's fascinating. So, what do academics do? What do people who work in presenting a positive face of America to the world, people who have devoted their life to serving the American people in government, what collectively and individually works to help retard, to slow, and potentially to stop this really menacing authoritarian movement?
I mean, just because Trump came in legally, he was elected, and then he has plenty of grassroots support. But the Democrats almost won the election. It was very close, and there's another America that will not go away, and we can speak out and be paragons of those other values, the justice, the democracy, equity. It doesn't mean we have to stay silent and have the world think that it's all been eclipsed. So that's something that we each can do in our own way, especially outward facing to the world, because that's part of your question. I think it's very important. We're seeing protest, lots of protest around the country of small scale, and it's not being covered by the media as a phenomenon, and it should be. Just because there's not, organized, mass protests like we're seeing abroad in Serbia or in Georgia, doesn't mean that there aren't plenty of people who are organizing. They're just doing it in their own way. I think this will build. So that's something to do. And the third thing is, now that the outcomes of the corruption and the destruction of government and the taking away benefits by paralyzing the system also are starting to become clear, this is the time to have conversations with people who are in your family or community or friends who have been brainwashed by MAGA, and they're not easy conversations to have, but this is the time to have them, because the signs are starting. The cracks in the facade of the Republican machine are getting bigger because the outcome is manifesting. And think about the inequality of having the richest man in the whole world come in and run your government. That's not what was the campaign promise of Trump, who posed as a populist. So there's an opening to have conversations with people now.
It's very fascinating. Tomorrow I'm going to have a piece on veterans, and veteran groups, as you know, tend
Yes.
to be quite conservative. They're now organizing and protesting because of the savage cuts to veterans who disproportionately make up our civilian service against VA cuts, even the suicide prevention line was taken offline at
Yes.
one point. So you're right, it does help mobilize. And I would just say to my contrarian friends, I had a conversation today with someone whose business is organizing, and she said something interesting. She said there are actually more protests at this point in the Trump
Yeah.
administration 2.0 than there were in 1.0. It's the difference
Yes.
in coverage. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. That's why we have ongoing coverage of it. And as I have told our audience, Norm has told our audience, April 5 will be a day of mass mobilization. So perhaps the press will be forced to cover that. Ruth, I can't thank you enough. You are such a source of wisdom and insight, and really helps put all of this in perspective. As we have found out, this is not random. This is concerted. This is in keeping with a whole pattern of conduct that we see from authoritarian regimes. So thank you for coming to explain it to us, and also for giving us a path forward. So I'm sure we're going to have you back soon.
Always a pleasure, Jen.